Welcome to Golf in the Good Life, your guide to golf travel across the pond. I'm DJ Jones, joined as always by my good friend and colleague Connor Evers. Connor, the dog days of summer are nearly behind us. For this Floridian, they can't get here soon enough, or the end of them, I should say. But it also means that the golf travel season is wrapping up here within a matter of weeks. Curious, what is the view from H&B HQ?
DJ, appreciate the introduction and always a pleasure to be with you on these podcasts. But yeah, all is good here. I cannot believe how fast the summer went. I was thinking back, we were doing our first episode around the early part of April when our first group was leaving for the 2023 golf travel season. And now we are pretty much close to the completion of it. So still groups to leave until October, but plenty of time. But it definitely is starting to feel a little slower down, which has been great with some of our groups. But we've had some fantastic field reports from across the pond, some in Southwest Ireland, and more specifically in the Highlands of Scotland. We had a group up at the Dunrobin Castle and played Brora as well as Royal Darnick. And they did play kind of the latter half of August. And for three of the rounds, one of the gentlemen had shorts on. So shorts and pullover weather, which is kind of my favorite type of weather and favorite temperatures. So all looks good up in the Scottish Highlands. And the other big factor, not just with us with H&B, but just kind of honestly a worldwide golf date is the direct application for St. Andrews Opens. Is currently open, and it will be open until the 6th of September of 2023 for intended play for next year in 2024. So if you're a group that's traveling with us next year that's planning on balloting, we've probably sent this already to you, but definitely put that application in. And if you are looking to just in general of going next year, definitely put that application in, and the results will come out in sometime in October. So best of luck to everyone that is applying, and wish you nothing but the best for the old course and another course in St. Andrews for next year.
Well, that is great stuff and great insight. If you are looking to play the old course, it is a very effective way to do it, but you've got a narrow window. Like Connor said, closes up September 6th, and then you're down to basically at that point either balloting 48 hours beforehand or lining up at midnight, one or the other. So get that application in if you're considering the old course. But moving back to today's episode, the topic today is price. This is one of those things that is kind of like the third rail of the golf travel business. If you have planned a golf trip to Scotland or Ireland in the past, or maybe you're in the midst of doing it right now, you've probably experienced some of this firsthand. It's a little tough to gain a understanding or make heads or tails of cost at times, especially if you're comparing between companies. Price seems to be one of those things that's protected like Pemberton's recipe for Coca-Cola. And it can be a little frustrating. And we want to kind of cut through some of that frustration because, we have learned through the years that the more informed someone is when they make a decision, the better off everyone is, first off. But the other thing is that when someone comes to us and says, how much is this golf trip to Scotland going to cost me? They're not really ever asking what the price is. They're hardly ever asking for even a ballpark. What they really want to know is all of the choices and decisions that they're going to have to make that will ultimately decide their bottom line. What separates this $5,000 golf trip from a $10,000 one? And so today we're hoping to provide some clarity on this topic. And Connor, we are going to lean pretty heavily on your experience and expertise because you're dealing with this each and every day as one of our expedition planning managers to hopefully add that clarity that we're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to this. And it is I wouldn't say it's taboo, but it is like you said, DJ, it's a big question mark. And I think DJ and I are here today just to kind of give a little bit more context and just kind of educate everyone on the different factors that go into this, and probably just some stuff that folks don't actually realize when they're doing this. And we're going to start with kind of the first factor, which is, hey, when you go and how that can affect, travel. And this is very relative to, say, a trip, here in the States or just kind of anywhere in general. the better weather seasons are going to be the most expensive. So May, June, July, August are relatively, latter half of May, I should say, are kind of your high peak months. Relatively, it's the best weather to go, and you will pay for it. But if you're looking for more of an inexpensive package, and just travel in general, shoulder months of April and October can be good. And honestly, you can still receive some good weather during that time as well. So really, when you go is one of those big factors that can really reflect pricing.
And goes back to something that we have talked about so many times on this podcast, and that's the need for flexibility. I mean, if you are locked in to the 3rd week of July as your travel date, well, that's great. We can absolutely make it happen, but you need to be prepared to pay for it accordingly because that's the week of the Open Championship. And the entire world of golf is in Great Britain and Ireland, no matter where the Open is being held for that week. So, we've touched on it so many times. If you can be flexible, if you need to capture some value, consider those value months, like Connor said, but also, have some flexibility in terms of your exact date because that little bit of change, 1 week here or 1 week there, could ultimately make a pretty big difference in the end.
Definitely can. Flexibility, as DJ said, is key to these. And as you said, if it is that 3rd week in July, you are going to pay for it for sure. A lot of the accommodations, they're going to be a lot more money than what it normally is on a normal week in June, for example. The next kind of step up is kind of where you play and how many rounds you play on a trip. If you're over for 3 weeks and playing 15 rounds of golf or something like that, or a quick trip for about a week and maybe have some days at leisure, that affects it as well. But like a supply and demand, a lot of the big ticket and big trophy courses, we've talked about it multiple times on past podcasts with DJ and I, with a package that would include the old course guaranteed times, Muirfield day with lunch, Royal County Down and Royal Portrush, and want to say play them twice. A lot of our groups will do that. You know, that's great and all, but that is going to hit kind of the total cost of the trip with when it comes to green fees. But if you are a little bit more price sensitive, you can look at some other areas that have great value, such as the Scottish Highlands and Aberdeen or Northwest Ireland. Our first couple episodes were on that area too. So, it depends on, again, what your budget is. And I think that's the other big factor of working with the golf tour operators such as Haversham and Baker, where depending on your budget and what you really want, we can direct you in the right areas to kind of fit what you and your group are specifically looking for. Again, can't say it enough. Where you play matters.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a great point because it's not even just regions as a whole. Like you touched on Northwest Ireland or the Highlands or what have you, but even within, what we would call, say, the popular big name regions. St. Andrews is a perfect example. There are 2 or 3 courses, even probably more than that, that are still considered off the beaten path that, for someone who's maybe looking to capture a little more value from a price standpoint, well, add one of those to your trip and you're probably not going to regret it because I can't tell you how many times we're going through our surveys post trip and someone says, Kilspindie was my favorite round, or Fortros and Rose Marquis was my favorite round. 2 courses that have huge name courses practically next door, but yet it was the unknown place, the place that they arrived with no expectations that wound up making that lasting memory. So don't be afraid to add those lesser known courses to the itinerary, especially if you're trying to save a couple bucks, because yes, they are going to do that. The other thing is, and you touched briefly on, playing 2 rounds at, say, Portrush or County Down. That's a very common approach in our itineraries because a lot of times the first thing you say when you walk off a place like Royal County Down is, "I wish I'd played it twice." Well, sometimes when you're comparing itineraries, they can look pretty similar on paper. We hear that quite often that, I'm trying to understand the difference between Company A and Company B. Well, Company A might have had 2 rounds at, say, the Turnberry Elsa course, and Company B might have had 1 round on the Elsa and 1 round on the King Robert the Bruce. And with no disrespect to the King Robert the Bruce, no one is going to say that that should be the choice over 2 rounds on the Elsa. You certainly want to do 2 rounds at an open road, of course, versus one or the other. And there's several places around the British Isles where that is a thing. Port Rush and the Valley and the Dunluce, Ballybunion has the Cashin course, Royal Troon has the Portland, so as you're comparing and you're looking at these two things, take note. It will add maybe something in terms of the cost of the trip, but that may explain some of that difference. Is that second round on that top tier course versus the sister course next door?
Yeah, you're definitely right, DJ. Definitely right. And kind of next thing up here is where you stay, the level of accommodations and kind of the amenities that you want kind of go into that factor. So if you're a group that, hey, maybe you have some tourists on your trip, and they're not going to go out with their driver host to tour, they're going to stay there and they want to take advantage of the spa. Obviously a hotel with the spa and some other amenities, is going to cost a little bit more. Other things like, hey, a balcony view or just a view of the old course, or if you stay in town, with walking distance to all pubs and restaurants, all those different factors that go into it will affect kind of the bottom line of a package price. So, and kind of last thing when it comes to where you stay and more specifically the room, sometimes we'll get it a lot where people say, hey, we're there for the golf and we're only going to be in the room for a little bit. And yeah, that's fine. But really the room class and the room category, it matters. This is a vacation. This isn't, going on a business trip somewhere here in the States. You want to have a nice room with, with plenty of space, maybe a sitting area, et cetera. So you may see it on paper that, hey, the room class is this, but do a little bit more digging and see what that room class and pictures of what that room looks like. Make sure you have enough space and really enjoy yourself. So, again, a lot of those different factors, they all come together in, again, what the bottom line is for lodging.
That last part about the room type, really drives home the difference between price and value. Like you said, this is your trip. It should be what you want it to be. And if waking up in the morning and having your morning cup of coffee out on your balcony, overlooking the old course at St. Andrews while the sun comes up over the RNA, if that's the kind of thing that's going to add value to your experience, and I kind of think that it does, then by all means, you should book it. When the trip is over and you look back on these things, you're not going to remember the few $100 that you saved with that other view. But you are absolutely 1000% going to remember what it felt like to open that balcony door and walk out and have your coffee overlooking the old course. You are absolutely going to tell your friends about it, and you're certainly going to post on Instagram about it. And so in the scheme of things, yes, these little choices like your room type, it does make a difference. But this is where you really got to think through each one and decide what is really going to be of importance to me. And this is where having a golf travel company that is willing to tailor your choices to your trip as opposed to pigeonholing you into their stock itinerary, this is where there can be a huge difference between companies. And but more importantly, in the end, the trip needs to be yours. And so make those choices accordingly.
You're definitely right, TJ. I mean, I played the old course last fall and really enjoyed my round, but I also had a great room in St. Andrews and overlooked, the old course. And I did wake up in my robe and drank my coffee with the view of everyone they're in line waiting there for the singles queue. So, and the next kind of factor up is who's your roommate. Really there's kind of two different kind of decisions you have to make, and depending on the group. But are you going to share with the roommate or have your own single room? And this can really drive the cost depending on what you prefer, and you can save some money if you do decide to share. But in the States, if you have a room here and there's two beds, it's usually a double or a queen size bed. There's two of them. Across the pond, they have two twin beds, so it's essentially one king bed that they separate into two twin beds. So it's a little bit smaller. It's probably not what a lot of people are used to. So we have to inform our groups of that and what they feel comfortable doing. So obviously, if you're okay with that and okay to saving some money, that's great. But that is a big factor that it comes into kind of the final decision of deciding to go single versus double occupancy. And there are some accommodations across the pod, not many, but some that we use specifically with H&B. Some types of lodges, for example, Doonbeg in Ireland has some different lodging options with 4-bedroom lodges. You can actually split into two beds, two twin beds into each room, so you can actually get 8 gentlemen into one kind of B&B lodging situation. There's another one at the Rustics Hotel in St. Andrews own. So there's a few different options that way. So if you're happy, with kind of going that route, there are some options there too. But if you do single occupancy, that can be a big difference in pricing at the end.
This is one topic where it really pays to have an expert who knows these hotels in and out and knows what the different room categories are and can speak to the size of those rooms, because every year we all head over across the pond, we check in at the various hotels and golf courses and restaurants, and part of that usually involves touring and checking out rooms. And I can walk into a hotel room and know within about 4 seconds whether it's going to work for
Hmm.
a twin group. Because the fact is that many of them are simply too small for two grown humans to share
Hmm.
for multiple nights. And so going back to that 2 quotes thing, you might have one that has priced out, the standard twin, and the other has priced out the deluxe, and in case of H&B, that's usually the case because we know that that standard room, from a size standpoint, probably isn't going to cut it. But the other thing is, this is where it's important to be kind of honest with yourselves as a group in terms of your ability to straight up put up with one another for a week sharing rooms. Some groups you've traveled every year, you're used to hanging out together and and sharing rooms and so forth, and that's great. Go for it. Save that money. You're gonna, you won't regret it. But some groups, if it's people that you don't really know or you've never traveled together, really decide if it's worth this amount of savings to not have your own personal space for a week with someone that you don't know, because it's a long time to be over there sharing a room if you and your roommate aren't a great fit.
That's true. And yeah, and you said it perfectly, DJ. And to your point too about, the rooms and the different classes, we'll get some questions that we'll put a trip together for a group, and they ask, hey, why didn't you put us in the introduction room? And it's like, well, there's a reason. It's because it's not large enough for two of you. It's not enough space. And you may think, oh, again, to my past thing, oh, we're only in the room for a little bit, but it matters. It may not matter on paper. It may not matter, 12 months before you depart, but it's going to matter when you arrive at the hotel in Scotland or Ireland. Trust us. I cannot
100%.
reiterate that enough. So the next point up is, hey, who's driving? Are you deciding to self-drive yourself or deciding to hire a driver host? And DJ and I have had a past episode on this and have talked into the depths and all increments of how this works and costing and what have you. But to kind of go through it again, for smaller groups, for couples, or for a group of two golfers, the transportation cost is a fixed cost. So if you look at apples to apples between the both, more than likely it's going to be not only a few hundred, but sometimes even a few $1,000s of savings between the two. So again, it really depends on what you value. Yeah, it is a significant cost difference, but it is your first time in Ireland and Scotland, and you do not feel comfortable driving on the left side of the road, having the steering wheel on the right side of the vehicle. I can go on and on and on. So you may go online and doing this, trying to do this yourself and attempting to, and you see online that, oh, this is an 8-seater van, we can get all 8 in. No, we actually only put about 4 people, actually 4 people is the max, in one of these bigger passenger vans, because it is completely different from what we have in the States compared to across the pond. And we've had some conversations with that for some of our groups that said, hey, you're going to need multiple of these different vans for your group, because it's not only thinking of everything else with the people, but you got to think of checked luggage, your golf clubs, a carry-on, backpack, all those other things that go into it. If you have a bigger group and decide wanting to drive, a lot of times multiple vans versus driving a driver host, sometimes the driver host is actually less expensive.
But not only that, you talked about the value and the stress of driving on the left side of the road and all of that, but you've also added a ninth person or a fifth person or a third person to your group by way of your driver host. And not only is it an extra person, it is essentially another concierge who's at your service to handle dinner reservations, to handle some suggestions for touring, to take you to the touring, to take you to everywhere, to help solve things if something goes sideways. And it is amazing how easily that happens when you've got an expert that's sitting there with you that has been around the block, that knows all the people at the hotels or knows the people at the golf courses, and can really help you get your trip back in the fairway. So there is some huge value to that. Not to mention that, you're avoiding all that stress that comes with essentially always being on when it comes to, a self-drive because you're finishing your round of golf, you're getting back in the car and you're on. You've got to think about driving, you've got to think about where you're going, you got to deal with parking. Oh my goodness, parking over there. Anyway, it's just all of that adds up in the end. And there's a reason why so many of our travelers, the vast majority, opt to go with the driver host.
So, kind of the last thing here, it's a little more fun, but just some other things that a lot of folks probably are not thinking of, or maybe have in the past, but just want to solidify it, is just some additional costs and things to just think of as well that's outside of golf, transportation, and lodging. You have to fly over across the pond, so airfare is going to be one of those big factors as well. And again, kind of to my first point of when you go, if you do fly over in kind of the earlier part or latter half of the season, it could be less money. We've talked about this too at a past podcast, but caddy fees, generally this adds about, give or take, 100 pounds or euros per person per round of golf. If you want to take a caddy or not, and not at all golf courses, but most, it's completely your decision. So we've talked about it too, but the value of having a caddy on your for your round of golf is amazing, and it adds so much value to your round. And a lot of the stories and memories that I have aren't playing golf, aren't walking the fairways, they are with the caddy and the conversations with them and the people's names. It's amazing. So, touring, we say it all the time, but stop and smell the roses, as cliche as it sounds. But I mean, you do not want to regret just going to Scotland and Ireland and being a Barry bag tag, as I said, and playing as many rounds as you can. So, some touring, so some guided tours, maybe, for example, you're doing a St. Andrews and Edinburgh tour and you arrive in Scotland on that first day. You do not want to play golf. You want to kind of get the blood flowing and maybe do a little tour. Hey, book a 2 hour walking tour of St. Andrews and see the different sites, see the university, maybe a full day tour, say of the Scottish Highlands, or a food tour of Belfast, stuff like that. Maybe you have an off day or some time after or before a round of golf. We've talked about it in the past episode too, but whiskey tastings, they're not too expensive. I mean, I've found they're usually 8 or so euros or pounds, all the way up to 15 or 20. It just depends on the location and depends on the place. So, we've had groups even do kilt renting. They'll get fit for kilts in Scotland. So you do that as well as a fun thing. Merchandise, if you're going to some of these, marquee courses and don't get something from the golf shop, I think you're a little crazy. So you should get something and sport that logo back home. And kind of the last thing here is just food and beverage. A lot of times breakfasts across the pond are enormous and they get you pretty much throughout the whole day. And in my personal experience, a lot of times even sometimes too much food. But if you are a little hungry, I mean, sometimes the courses, depending on where you're playing, not too many, but they do have sometimes of a turn, like Carnoustie, they've got one. So it's really good. I think they have some chili there, which isn't too bad. So you get some food there at the turn. But not all the courses have that, but maybe put a granola bar or a snack in your golf bag. Just some other things there that you may want to look at as other additional costs.
Yeah, you're definitely spot on about the breakfasts. I mean, usually by the end of the week, I don't need to see scrambled eggs and smoked salmon again for about 6 months, but it's enough to, usually to carry me through at least, to the late afternoon. The overall theme here and, as we have kind of walked through each of these key decisions is that obviously all of those come together to ultimately drive a final figure. And another one, of course, is going to be whether you choose to go it alone in your planning or enlist the service of a golf travel company. And of course, there's going to be a difference with that, but with the benefit of that expert that's guiding you through all of this, not only comes obviously the better decision making along the way, whether it's the where and the when and the who's driving and all of those choices, but also the intangibles that it brings to the table when you're working with a company like H&B, who's been at it 30 years and has built a reputation and relationships with everyone across the pond that gets invested back into your trip. And it's funny how it winds up bringing the best caddies and the better rooms and the better driver hosts and the better vehicles. Because in the end, folks that are traveling with us, they're going in the pro shop, like Connor said. They're taking the whiskey tours. They're doing those things that are ultimately adding to, the golf economy, if you will, of the entire area. So as you're comparing self versus enlisting a golf travel company, those intangibles, it's impossible to put a line item on your price point, but what it's adding to your experience can't be measured in the end. But Connor, I think we did a pretty great job of covering those key topics and hopefully adding some of that clarity, like we talked about, to the topic of price. Any final thoughts before we wrap her up here?
EJ, this was great, and as you said, I hope it brings more clarity and a little bit more answers to kind of that first question that a lot of folks have. A lot of times people don't think of a lot of these things, and when we start really going through all of them, and even if they've gone across the pond, before the first time, they realize I can't do this alone, and sometimes you have to put the ego aside, and this is not going to Myrtle Beach for a weekend or something. This is a bigger fish to fry, if you will, with all the different details and what have you that go into it. So, but we are more than happy to help when looking at these different types of trips.
Well, you're right. This has been really great. Everything that we have covered today will be noted in the show notes. We have actually a couple guides as it relates to cost on our website that we'll link to. But as always, if you have any questions, shoot us a DM on social media or send us an email, golf@haversham.com. But otherwise, thank you for tuning in. We will be back again soon with another episode. But until then, we wish you plenty of golf at its finest and life at its best.